Hi everyone. Today I am going to be reading My Father's Dragon, Chapter 5. My Father Meets Some Tigers is the title. Okay, here's our reading objective for today. We can keep track of characters' adventures throughout chapters. So, My Father's Dragon is a little bit different than some of the other books we read because it's a chapter book. We read one chapter in one sitting, and we're not necessarily finishing the whole book in the one sitting that we read, right? We're breaking it up into parts. So, what we're going to practice doing today is taking notes so that we remember what happened in the chapter before so that we're easily ready to pick up and read the next chapter. Okay, before we start, I have some vocabulary that I'd like to go over with you. Okay, vocabulary are words that you're going to see in the text that you may know and understand, or you may not. I'm just making sure that you do by giving these pictures, okay? The word trespassing comes up in the story. The tigers accuse or say that my father is trespassing. That means he's not supposed to be there, right? They're saying, this is my property. You don't belong here. This is not your jungle. It's my jungle, right? I put this picture next to trespassing because you might recognize this on places where you're not supposed to go. Private property, no trespassing. That means that, you're not supposed to be there if you see one of those signs. The word contradict is also in the story when my father is speaking with the tigers. So there's this funny little penguin emoji here. It says, what are other words for contradicting? Other words are contradictory, opposing, disagreeing, differing. So when they use the word contradict, he says he never wants to contradict a tiger. That means he does not want to disagree with the tiger, even if he thinks that the tiger might be wrong. Lastly, they talk about chewing gum, and I just want to make sure that you understand that chewing gum is just like regular gum, like any of these brands that you see here, right? That's what he's giving to the tigers, okay? Also, above the fish over here, it says, look out for the word fond. When you are fond of something, it means you like it. So they're going to talk about how the tigers are fond of chewing gum, all right? So when you finish a chapter, you're going to write a sentence or two about what happened. Leave it at the end of the chapter so you can come back to it later. So just so you know, I want you to be thinking of that as we're reading. Okay, here we go. Chapter 5. My father meets some tigers. The river was very wide and muddy, and the jungle was very gloomy and dense. The trees grew close to each other, and what room there was between them was taken up by great high ferns with sticky leaves. My father hated to leave the beach, but he decided to start along the river bank, where at least the jungle wasn't quite so thick. He ate 3 tangerines, making sure to keep all the peels this time, and put on his rubber boots. My father tried to follow the river bank, but it was very swampy, and as he went farther, the swamp became deeper. When it was almost as deep as his boot tops, he got stuck in the oozy, mucky mud. My father tugged and nearly pulled his boots right off, but at last he managed to wade to a drier place, so he got himself to a drier place. Here the jungle was so thick that he could hardly see where the river was. He unpacked his compass and figured out the direction he should walk in order to stay near the river. But he did not know that the river made a very sharp curve away from him, just a little way beyond. And so he walked straight ahead, and he was getting farther and farther away from the river. Uh-oh, that wasn't his plan. It was very hard to walk in the jungle. The sticky leaves of the ferns caught at my father's hair, and he kept tripping over roots and rotten logs. Sometimes the trees were clumped so closely together that he couldn't squeeze between them and had to walk a long way around. He began to hear whispery noises, but he couldn't see any animals anywhere. The deeper into the jungle he went, the surer he was that something was following him, and then he thought he heard whispery noises on both sides of him as well as behind him. That's what I'm picturing the sound to be like. He tried to run, but he tripped over more roots, and the noises only came nearer. Once or twice he thought he heard something laughing at him. At last he came into a clearing and ran right into the middle of it, so that he could see anything that might try to attack him. Was he surprised when he looked and saw 14 green eyes coming out of the jungle all around the clearing, and when the green eyes turned into 7 tigers. The tigers walked around him in a big circle, looking hungrier all the time. And then they sat down and began to talk. Here comes one of our vocabulary words. I suppose you thought we didn't know you were trespassing in our jungle. Uh-oh, he doesn't sound pleased. Then the next tiger spoke. I suppose you're going to say you didn't know it was our jungle. Did you know that not one explorer has ever left this island alive? Said the third tiger. My father thought of the cat and knew this wasn't true. But of course, he had too much sense to say so. One doesn't, here's another vocab word, contradict or disagree with a hungry tiger. The tigers went on talking in turn. You're our first little boy, you know. I'm curious to know if you're especially tender. Maybe you think we have regular meal times, but we don't. We just eat whenever we're feeling hungry, said the fifth tiger. And we're very hungry right now. In fact, I can hardly wait, said the sixth tiger. I can't wait, said the seventh tiger. And then all the tigers said in a loud roar, let's begin right now. And they moved in closer. My father looked at those 7 hungry tigers, and then he had an idea. He quickly opened his knapsack and took out the chewing gum. The cat had told him that the tigers were especially fond of chewing gum, which was very scarce on the island, so he threw them each a piece, but they only growled. As fond as we are of chewing gum, we're sure we'd like you even better. And they moved so close that he could feel them breathing on his face. But this is a very special chewing gum, said my father. If you keep on chewing it long enough, it will turn green. And then if you plant it, it will grow more chewing gum. And the sooner you start chewing, the sooner you'll have more. The tiger said, Why, you don't say. Isn't that fine? And as each one wanted to be the first to plant the chewing gum, they all unwrapped their pieces and began chewing as hard as they could. Every once in a while, one tiger would look into another's mouth and say, Nope, it's not done yet. And finally, they were all so busy looking into each other's mouths to make sure that no one was getting ahead that they all forgot about my father. Here are all the tigers eating their chewing gum. My father really did trick him. All right. So, I'm going to read this again, right? If you can, please take out a sticky note or a piece of paper that you can put maybe on your reading response or somewhere safe, maybe on the desk where you're doing your work, so you can remember what chapter 5 was about. I want you to get a pencil or something to write with, okay? And this is what I want you to do. When you finish a chapter, write a sentence or two about what happened. Leave it at the end of the chapter so you can come back to it later. So you don't have the book, but if you did have the book, you would stick this right where you ended, right? Because you don't have the book, you're just going to stick it somewhere that you know you can remember it, okay? And you want to make sure that you're labeling it chapter 5 so that you remember this was about chapter 5 of the book, okay? I want you to pause the video and write at least 2 sentences, and then unpause, and I'll show you what my example looks like for this, okay? So here's a good example of a summary that you can write down, right? I clearly say, in chapter 5, my father runs into 7 tigers. They do not like that he is trespassing in their jungle. To get the tigers to leave the main character alone, he gave the tigers chewing gum because the cat had told him they liked it, right? It didn't go over every single detail, but it did give you a summary of what happened in the last chapter. So when you go to listen to chapter 6, you'll know right away, you'll remember right away what chapter 5 is about, okay? Let's try some comprehension questions now. I want to make sure you understood what we read today. All right, why couldn't the main character continue to follow the river and instead ventured further into the jungle? I want you to think about this question. Pause the video. When you're ready for the answer, go ahead and unpause. So the answer is, the river was so muddy, he got stuck in the ooze and decided to travel in the jungle next to the river using his compass. But the river had a bend he didn't know about that took him far away from it. I also added the page number where you could find that. It was on page 35 in the text. You wouldn't be able to do that because you're just listening, but I want to show you what really good readers do when they're writing about their reading. Okay, number 2. How many tigers crept up on Elmer? I want you to think about, Elmer is my father, right? So I want you to think about this question. When you think you know the answer, go ahead and unpause your video. There were 7 tigers. Remember, 14 eyes. There are 2 eyes on each tiger. So there are 7 tigers with 2 eyes on each. That's where they got the number 14. And again, I referenced that was on page 37. Okay? Third question. What knowledge did the cat give to the main character that helped him stop the tigers from eating him? Pause and think about this question. Unpause when you're ready for the answer. The tigers love chewing gum. That was on page 38, right? That was his big tip, that the tigers love chewing gum. Although it did take a little bit of extra effort on his part to say that it was special chewing gum, right? And that it was going to grow, because they were not interested when it was just regular chewing gum. However, they were tricked quite easily, and my father was able to get away. Okay, students, so I hope you enjoyed our reading of My Father's Dragon today. What we're going to do is next week we'll read My Father's Dragon chapter 6. And please keep track of the sticky note you made today with your summary of chapter 5. Good readers who read chapter books always leave a little note about what happened in the chapter before so they can make sure they remember. Okay, students, have a great rest of your day. Bye. Oh, and don't forget to fill out your reading response form at this time.